Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be doing another Zodiac piece. Today we are actually going to be doing my Zodiac sign, which is Taurus. And I thought a fun way to do this would be to do a different cow type creature. I wanted to do something really fluffy with big horns, so I thought a yak would be really cool. Anyways, let's get started. Actually, before we get started, I want to show you guys our new setup for the art studio. These are our old tables and how I had everything originally set up. They're kind of just temporary, and then I finally found some really nice tables that match my computer desk, and I've got two of them set up now. So we got one huge kind of setup against the back wall, and I'm really happy with it. Just figured I'd show that off because our little table setup is completely different and you're gonna notice it, so I figured I'd just zoom out and show you how everything looks right now. Okay, now that I'm done showing that off, we can start on our clay. So the first thing that I need to work on are our horns, because I need those pretty much baked and ready to add to the face. And we're actually not going to be even making the entire horn, I'll explain that later. But right now I have a piece of tin foil, that way we can make part of it hollow and lighter, and I'm adding a wire to it so I have something to hold on to while we add clay to this. So I'm going to get this attached to the wire, and then I'm going to start covering this in clay and trying to smooth it out as best as I can. I'm not too worried if I don't get it completely smooth because I plan on sanding this later. Now you'll probably notice that I'm leaving the end of the horn very blunt, and that's not because I'm worried about like accidentally hurting myself with the horn, which I could possibly do because I am pretty klutzy. But what I'm mainly doing is I'm going to be doing the end of the horn with epoxy sculpt. That way it's more durable, because it's going to be thinner at that point and I'm worried about the other clay breaking. So I'm going to get this done and we're going to bake it, and then we can start on our clay head. We'll add the epoxy sculpt after we get the head done. So for the head, I'm going to get my tinfoil base completely covered in clay, and we're going to start getting a basic shape laid out. I want the nose and the front of the snout to be quite large, so I'm going to try and emphasize that a bit. For this, I had to add a decent amount of extra clay to the very front of the face. I didn't really lay out the tinfoil correctly to fill that in and make it kind of hollow and light, so hopefully we don't make the head too heavy. Once I have a basic shape laid out for the face, I'm going to start adding our horns. So I'm going to take those baked horns and I'm just going to figure out where I want them on the top of the head, and I'm going to push them in really hard. It's going to take a little bit of muscles, and then I'm just going to try and make them as even as possible, and I'm going to blend the clay into them. Then I'm going to work on laying out the other facial features. Now for the glass eyes, I'm not going to add them just yet, but I am going to mark them out with some glass pieces, which are basically the glass eyes but without the eye part. You know what I mean. I'm going to put those in place so I can kind of mark that out, and then I'm going to work on adding all the detail to the mouth and nose. I'm going to add a strip of clay to make the upper lip for the mouth, and I'm going to blend that in and use my tools to kind of clean it up and refine the opening of the mouth. Now for the nose, I don't think I need to add any extra clay. The head is pretty much heavy enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my tools and I'm going to push in and make the indentions for where the nostril holes would be. I'm going to make them as even as possible, and then I'm going to use my tools to refine the shape of them and add texture to the nose. Once I'm happy with how everything looks, I'm going to do a bake. So we need to bake our clay for about 45 to 55 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Once it's out of the oven and is cool to touch, we can mix up our epoxy sculpt and start adding it to the ends of the horns and to frame our new eyes that we're going to add. So I think it would probably be best to do the eyes first, and then we can add the clay to the ends of the horns. Now with adding the clay to the horns, I'm going to do my best to try and blend it in as best as possible, but I'm not too worried about it because once we have this cured, I'm just going to sand it down and clean everything up. So I mainly just want to get that shape laid out and make sure that we have them the same length. Once everything's done curing, I'll get my sandpaper and I'm just going to go over them and finish everything up to make sure that they're nice and smooth. Okay, so we're pretty much done sculpting the clay head. Now we need to work on the hooves. So similar to how we started the horns, we have lumps of tinfoil that we're going to attach to some wire frames. Once that's done, we're going to cover this up in clay and then we can start adjusting the shape of the hooves. So we'll end up splitting them in half and just kind of cleaning everything up and adding a bit of texture to it. I don't want to add too much detail to it. After we're done with all 4 of the hooves, we're going to put these in the oven to bake for probably about the same time as the head, 45 to 55 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Then once we have all of our clay pieces done baking and they've cooled to touch, the epoxy has completely cured, we can start working on our painting. Now, since this is my zodiac sign, I figured I would have fun with it and make it my favorite color, which is purple. Not really much of a surprise there. So for primering, I'm going to be doing a little bit more bluish color, and then we're going to add more of the purple color to this. So I'm just going to get that primered first, and then we're going to slowly get to the purple color that we need. So I'm starting off more on the darker side of my colors, and then I'm going to gradually adjust it and get it that lighter purple. And then for the end of the nose, I'm going to have that a lot lighter than the rest of the face. This will kind of help it stand out a little bit more and show all the extra details that we're going to be painting on the nose. For the nose, I'm going to start adding some pinks and whites to it to just kind of brighten it up and make it stand out a little bit more. And then I will use my darker colors to really clean up those holes for the nostrils, make them look a little bit darker. And we'll also do that a little bit around the eyes as well. Once I'm happy with how the face looks, I'm going to move on to painting the horns. Now I actually plan on glittering these completely, but I don't want any of this blue primer to show through the glitter, so I'm going to go over it with a kind of goldish paint that is very similar to the glitter that I'm going to add. That way it looks like one solid, like, shiny thing. Once I'm done painting, I'm going to peel off the paint that got on our glass eyes and make sure they're nice and clean. And then we're going to move on to painting the hooves real quick, and then we'll start glittering. So for the hooves, I'm going to be basically making them the same gold as the horns. So I'm going to get those primered as well, pretty much the same way. You're probably wondering why I started with blue on the hooves since we're just going to be doing gold. And the main reason is I want the color to match how I did the horns. And I figured if I didn't have the blue under, it might take the paint differently. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that they matched. Okay, glitter time. So for the face, what I ended up doing was I ended up painting over all the stuff that I don't want to get glitter with my resin. So I just applied a layer of that and I let it cure. Mainly because I don't want any of the glitter to stick to the paint, and it's not going to stick to the cured resin. It's going to be easier to clean off of that than unfinished paint. So that already is done, and what we're going to do for the horns and the hooves is paint on a very thin layer of resin, and then we're going to pour our glitter on top of this, or sprinkle it, or however you decide to add your glitter. You could even, if you have enough glitter, just dip it in there. Now obviously I'll have to let the resin cure to really lock in that glitter, so I'll have to wait for the next day, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fur the face. So I'm going to take chunks of my fur fabric, I've got it cut to kind of fit specific areas of the face, and I'm going to glue that in place. Then I'm going to take cut pieces of it and I'm going to start gluing layers and just kind of filling in and covering up the seams. Eventually I'll move to really short bits of it. Now I'll have to let the glue dry a little bit. I want to make sure that nothing falls off, and then I can do a little bit of touch up with my paint. You'll want to make sure the head is completely dry before we start putting everything together. So I'm going to set it off to the side and we're going to work on sewing the fabric so we can start assembling the doll. Okay, so here is the pattern for our yak. I've tried to leave it as simple as possible, mainly because we're going to be using very long fur, so you don't have to be very specific on certain shapes. It's just going to be very fluffy. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take the side pieces for the body and I'm going to actually add some yarn to it to kind of give it like a bit of gold highlight. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to cut a bunch of pieces of yarn. The easiest way to do this is to wrap it around something a lot and then cut it, and then you can have a bunch of pieces the same length. I'm going to tie about 3 to 4 pieces together just right in the middle of it, and then what we're going to do to add it is we're going to cut tiny holes and run the yarn through the holes and sew them in place. So I'm just going to focus kind of around the bottom section of the body and kind of have it like frame the longer ends of the hair. I kind of want it to like possibly fade from the purple to the gold. We'll see how it looks. I'm also going to add a little bit of yarn to the tuft of fur that I'm going to have at the end of the tail. Once I'm done adding all the yarn, I'm going to start sewing our fabric pieces together, starting with adding the fabric for the legs to the sides of the body. I was lucky enough to find a minky fabric of the same color as the fur fabric, and that's what I'm going to use for the legs. So I'm going to get the leg fabric attached to the sides of the body, and then I'm going to take the inside sections of the legs and I'm going to sew that down the front section, combining the two sides of the legs together. You'll want to leave the back open for when we start putting the doll together. After that, I'm going to take the fabric for the belly and we're going to connect each side piece to each side of this, kind of just making it one solid piece of fabric that we can slide over our wireframe. And then for finishing the tail, I have a long strip of that minky fabric. I'm going to sew the tuft of fur at the end of it, and then we can close this up like a tube and stuff it. Okay, now we can start putting our doll together. We've got everything ready. I made a wireframe ahead of time. It's a little bit reinforced for the head because it's kind of heavy. I'm going to take basically the wire for the neck and I'm going to make a hole in the back of the head that I'm going to fill with glue. And we're going to push that wire in place and hold it in place until it dries. And we're just going to take our fabric and we're going to run it over the wireframe. We're going to take the fabric for the neck and glue it all the way around the base of the head, let that dry a little bit, and then we're going to start stuffing and closing up our body. Once we get to the very end, we're going to actually work on the back legs. So I'm going to take the hooves and we're going to add it to the wireframe for each leg. Then we can take the fabric for the legs and we can glue it around the bases of the hoofs, and we can start stuffing and closing up the back legs. When we get to almost closing up the back end, we're going to add the tail. Now we just have doing the front legs. So I'm going to do basically the same thing as the back legs. We're going to add those hooves to the wire frame. We're going to make sure to wrap them all nice and tight. Then we can take our glue and we can glue the fabric for the legs around the base of the hooves, stuff and close them up. Okay guys, and here is my zodiac sign, Taurus. I had so much fun with this project. I really liked messing around with adding the fluffiness to him and changing how my fur lays. It was a lot of fun messing around with it to give him that yacky feel. But yeah, if anyone wants to buy our cute little yak friend, give him a new home, I've got my website linked down below. All my other art dolls that are for sale are up there, and you can check it out. While down there's a bunch of other links to different art supplies and stuff, so if you guys are interested in what I like to use, you can check those out. If you do buy anything through them, it does help support the channel. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, to all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!